Hey everybody, it's Mr. Ampersand, and I have a fun book to share with you guys today. I really dig this one. This is Arnie the Doughnut by Lori Keller. She did the art and the words, which is kind of cool. I also like how there are tons of puns in this book. Puns are a very specific type of humor that some people really love, and some people they just groan, and I love it. If you ever get to watch the news with Carl Azuz on CNN 10, he always ends with puns, and sometimes the kids really groan. Anyway, this one, even on the cover, it says here, Arnie the Doughnut, cooked up by Lori Keller. Instead of just saying written by and illustrated by, it says cooked up. So, as you can see, it's that kind of book. So there's all these little quotes from donuts on the front. Oh, I'm sorry, but that girl cannot cook. I know, it's a figure of speech. See, they're saying Lori Keller can't cook. And then there's the chef. It's like, oh, she had a little hope for me. Anyway, it's a very silly book. I'm not going to be able to read all of the silly things around the outside, but I'll try to make sure that you guys have the ability to see them. So on the first inside page, you can see all of the publishing information. It says Henry Holt and Company, all these things, but it's showing the bakery is closed in the dark, but there's still somebody inside sweeping, a couple people like cleaning things up, putting chairs up. Anyway, then you get in a little bit more, and you can see from inside the bakery, there's the crew all making the donuts, but outside out the window, there are some teeth out there that are protesting the bakers, and they're saying, ban the donut. Donuts cause cavities. It's a silly book. So they're putting baking powder and sugar and all these things together to make their donuts. Flour. It says here, for cookie and for sage. Anyway. Arnie turned out to be just the kind of donut he'd hoped he'd be. Chocolate covered with bright colored candy sprinkles. Look at all my sprinkles! There must be 1,000,000 of them! Actually, there are only 135, but I'm not going to spoil it for him. He was made very early in the morning at the downtown bakery, home of the best donuts around. Arnie was proud to be one of the best. He knew that people all over town made special trips to his bakery to buy donuts of their very own. As Arnie sat on the tray, which had just been placed in the donut case, he took a moment to reflect on the amazing things that had happened to him that morning. He was cut into a ring by the ringy-dingy donut-making thingy. He was deep-fried, which is, going into a bath of boiling oil, which would not be fun for us, but seemed very fun for him. Then cooled off. Iced, where they put the icing on. Then they shook on the sprinkles. And then he got his name, Arnie. Arnie looked around and saw all sorts of donuts sitting nearby. There were crullers, plain crullers, and French crullers. Bonjour, madame. There was a cinnamon twist, donut holes, the long john, the powdered, the extremely rare square donut, the chocolate zebra donut, and then, of course, the jelly-filled. And then one of the donut holes is like, oh no, his brains are oozing out. He's not brain silly, it's jelly. And then he checks to make sure. No, it's jelly. He tried to strike up a conversation with an apple fritter on the next tray over, but she didn't seem to want to talk. How about that deep fryer? Any relation to Larry Fritter? Want to count my sprinkles? She doesn't really care. It's rather early. Maybe she's not a morning donut, Arnie supposed. It was 6 a.m. and the baker had just hung the open sign in the window. Arnie was fascinated as he watched the customers stream into the bakery. One by one, donuts were chosen, placed in paper bags, and whisked away with their new owners. Some went by the dozen in giant boxes. So much going on in this picture. This is so exciting. I wonder who will choose me. Goodbye, Arnie yelled to each donut. Have a great trip. Just then, Arnie looked up and saw a man pointing right at him. Moi? Moi, pronounced moi, is the French word for me. He learned it from moi. That's a French cruller. Before he could say another word, he was pulled from the tray and placed in a paper bag of his very own. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Bing. Have a nice day, Arnie heard the baker say to the man. Mr. Bing. That's a fine name, Arnie decided. I can hardly wait to meet him. The grand exit that Arnie's imagining. So this image is showing what Arnie thinks is happening. It's what is in his head. And there's that apple fritter that wouldn't talk to him. I should have talked to him while I had the chance. Goodbye, Arnie. Oh, such a great time. The ride to Mr. Bing's apartment was a little bumpy. Arnie was grateful for the soft napkin the baker had so thoughtfully placed underneath him in the bag. He had never ridden in a car and wished he could look out the window and see the sights, but more than anything, he wished he could meet Mr. Bing. Why does he keep me in this bag? Arnie wondered. Finally, the car came to a stop, and they were home. Mr. Bing carefully removed Arnie from his paper bag and placed him on a clean, shiny plate. Ooh, what a handsome plate, Arnie said to himself. I'm not crazy about the design. I prefer a more modern look, but it's nothing a little paint can't fix. Mr. Bing gently lifted Arnie from his new plate. Oh, isn't that cute, thought Arnie, as he closed his eyes and smiled. He wants to hold me. Now, friends, you are 5th graders. I imagine at this point you guys have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen next. I have read this book to 3rd graders. I have read this book to 1st graders. Everybody at this point has an idea of what's going to come next. That's important. That's a huge part of being a reader. Oh my gosh. How will this book end? So, like before, I want you to pause the video and I want you to either write down or draw a picture of what you think is going to happen next. Give yourself a couple minutes. Maybe not even what's going to happen next. How could this book possibly end? Oh, it's insane. Okay, I'm going to pause the video for myself right now and really think about this. So now you've thought about it. You predicted and sketched out what you think might happen at the end. What you've done there, it's a prediction, certainly, but you're also taking information from the text, clues from the text that the author has written in, and added them to what you already know. There are clues about how Arnie has been talking to other people that maybe he has a different idea of what's going to happen to him than we do, right? So the comedy, the funniness that's coming from this book is based on Arnie being wrong about what happens to donuts when they leave the donut shop. The bakery made him and sold him to Mr. Bing, and now Mr. Bing has the same idea that you have over what should happen to a donut, but Arnie has a different one. So because it's different, it's confusing and weird, because we're combining what we know with what we're reading. That's inferring to come up with something new. So, let's see where the author, Lori Keller, decided to take this story. As Arnie relaxed on Mr. Bing's hand, he felt himself moving higher and higher away from the plate. When he opened his eyes to see where he was going, he discovered that he was headed straight for Mr. Bing's open mouth. "What are you doing?" shouted Arnie. Mr. Bing was stunned. He dropped Arnie back onto the plate. I was going to eat you," he replied in shock. "Eat me?" Arnie shrieked, his sprinkles flying everywhere. "Why would you do a thing like that? Do you make a habit of eating all your house guests?" "No, of course not." "So why, then, did it suddenly occur to you to eat me?" Arnie demanded. "Well, because you're a donut. That's what donuts are for. To eat." "Do you mean to tell me you've done this before?" "Yes, I eat a donut every day," Mr. Bing said sheepishly. Arnie froze. He felt sick and frightened. "I'd better get out of here before he tries to eat me again." And angry. "Well, that explains why my friends never write or call. They've probably all been eaten." He thought to himself for a moment. "I must put a stop to this right away. I'll call the bakery and warn the others, whoever's left, that is." Arnie knew there was no time to waste, and that he needed to be very sneaky in order to keep his plan from Mr. Bing. He turned to Mr. Bing and said in his sweetest voice, "Excuse me, sir, but I don't believe we've been properly introduced. My name is Arnie. Um, hello, Arnie, Mr. Bing stammered. I'm Mr. Bing. It's nice to eat you. I mean to meet you. He's still shocked to actually be talking to a donut. Mr. Bing, would you be a dear and allow me to use your telephone? Arnie asked extra politely. Well, okay, said Mr. Bing, and he handed Arnie the phone. As quickly as he could, Arnie dialed the number of the bakery. The baker answered the phone. Downtown Bakery, home of the best. Mr. Bakerman, Arnie frantically whispered. This is Arnie the Doughnut. Do you remember me? You made me at 5:15 this morning, and I was bought about 20 minutes ago by a man who goes by the name of Mr. Bing. Yes, Arnie, the baker answered. What can I do for you? Now, I don't want to alarm you, but just moments ago, that man tried to eat me. And not only that, he claims to have eaten hundreds of us. I'm going to make a run for it, but I wanted to warn you so that if you see him coming into the bakery again, you can stop him. No, why, Arnie? I thought you understood. That's why I make donuts. For people to eat. I can't believe it, Arnie gasped. Are the other donuts aware of this arrangement? Well, I think so, the baker said. Let me ask them to make sure. The baker yelled at the other donuts. Do you donuts know that you're going to be eaten? Yes, we know, the donut shouted back. We're delicious. People love us. We're very popular. Try us for yourself. C'est magnifique. Did you hear that, Arnie? The baker asked. Arnie was crushed. The phone dropped from his hand. He'd heard all that he needed to hear. Arnie forgot all about his plan to escape. He collapsed back onto the plate, glanced up at Mr. Bing, and muttered, All right then, let's get this over with. Go ahead and eat me. Mr. Bing gazed down at Arnie. I'm not going to eat you, Arnie, he said reassuringly. I just wouldn't feel right about it now. Really? Arnie said with a huge sigh of relief. Well, I'm glad to see that you've come to your senses. But since I'm not going to eat you, Mr. Bing continued, I'll have to figure out something else to do with you. I paid good money for you. I don't want to be wasteful. Oh, of course not, Arnie agreed. What we need to do is each make a list of things I can do with you instead of eating you. Between the two of us, I know we'll come up with something. Good plan, Mr. Bing, Arnie said. This'll be a breeze. I bet I'm good at lots of stuff. They both feverishly wrote down their ideas. When they were finished, Mr. Bing asked, Would you like to read yours first? Sure thing, Mr. Bing, Arnie answered. So Mr. Bing and Arnie have decided that he's not food, and they're going to do something else with him. I am very excited to find out what is on their two lists. But first, I want you to pause, and I want you to make a list. What are some things that you might do? Now, every time I ask kids this, the first thing I get is, eat the donut, because I would love to eat a donut. But I can imagine that there are some of you, and most of you, who probably, if a donut started talking to you, would be less interested in eating it. So, what could Mr. Bing do with a donut that he doesn't want to eat? What are some things that they could do? Take some time, write that list, and come back to the video when you are done. Okay, now that you've made a list and you have some ideas of what you might do with a donut or what you think Mr. Bing could do with Arnie, let's see if the author chose to do some things that you also chose to do. Let's see how it goes. Things Mr. Bing can do with me instead of eating me. Do you need a ballroom dance partner? No, I don't dance. You could use a personal fitness trainer. I'd get too sweaty. How about a portrait painter? Oh, heavens no. Would you like me to entertain at your parties? I don't like throwing parties. I could be your chauffeur. But you can't see over the steering wheel. I'd make a great bodyguard. Who could you protect me from? A cookie? Alrighty, Mr. Bing. Well, let's hear what you came up with. Okie dokie, he replied. I just know you'll like some of these. Things I can do with Arnie instead of eating him. I could use you as a pincushion. Ooh, too painful. How about an air freshener for my car? How about not? Would you like to be a picture frame? Yeah, I don't imagine so. I need a new bowling ball. Well, don't look at me. You'd make a fine paperweight. Boring. Then what about a doorstop? Try again. But there was nothing else on Mr. Bing's list. They were both completely out of ideas. Arnie and Mr. Bing were exhausted. They felt terribly disappointed. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Mr. Bing finally spoke. I'm sorry, Arnie, but it's clear that we can't agree on anything for you to do around here. This is difficult for me to say, but I think it would be best if you found another home. I know, said Arnie, fighting back tears. I'll just be on my way then. Is it all right if I keep this napkin to pack all my loose sprinkles? Of course, Mr. Bing replied sadly. As soon as I get a job, I'll pay you back the money you spent on me. That's not necessary, Arnie. Arnie shook Mr. Bing's hand and thanked him for his kindness. Mr. Bing opened the door, and as Arnie left, he paused and said, I guess donuts really are only good for eating, aren't they? They both waved goodbye, and Arnie was gone. Mr. Bing stood at the window and watched as Arnie walked away. He walked past the flower beds, the mailboxes, the apartment manager's office. Remember how happy I was at the beginning of the story? Is there anything worse than a sad pastry? He passed the tennis court, the swimming pool, and the clubhouse. There's a fancy people party. Is that a donut? Yeah, whatever. Anyway, about my trip abroad. But when Arnie reached the No Dogs Allowed sign at the end of the driveway, Mr. Bing suddenly came up with a new idea. Arnie! Arnie! Wait up! Yelled Mr. Bing as he ran after him. Arnie turned back and stopped. When Mr. Bing caught up with him, he was out of breath. I can't believe I didn't think of this earlier, Mr. Bing panted. Arnie, I've always wanted a dog and could never have one because they're not allowed here, but there's no sign that says, No donuts allowed. Arnie perked up when he realized what Mr. Bing was thinking. Would you like to take walks and play fetch? Mr. Bing asked excitedly. You bet I would. Can you do tricks like rolling over? Rolling over? Look at me. I was made for rolling over. Well then, there's only one thing left to ask. Arnie, will you be my donut dog? Oh, Mr. Bing, I would love to be your donut dog. From that moment on, Arnie and Mr. Bing were inseparable. Arnie liked being a donut dog even better than he liked being a donut. He went through a short phase of chewing on furniture and barking at the mailman, but after a crash course in obedience school, he graduated first in his class. Everywhere the two of them went, people would stop to pet Arnie. No one had ever seen a donut dog before. You're so sticky, yes you are. I love that, Arnie. Hey, you got a napkin? Arnie and Mr. Bing had so much fun together. Arnie was the best pet Mr. Bing could ever have hoped for. And Mr. Bing was Arnie's best friend. Beware of donuts. Thank you for reading along with me, friends. Please share your pictures below. I would love to see your prediction of how this book might have ended and your list if you have when you created it. I'm sure they're pretty amazing. You guys are awesome. Talk to you soon.